Today we're going to go over upper torso. So let's look at this bone structure first. I want to go over a few important keys before we study the muscle part. So if you look at the bone, let's go over first how the size is matter. So if you take your character's head, skull, and change it to a profile view, and we can count it as a one head. And if you compare it to pelvis, the width, the ribs cage is about 1.2 head. Okay, even the pelvis, the width is same as the ribs. So ribs and pelvis, they're not that big compared to the head. But this number here is definitely a number that you can always, play around. Remember, we talked about, balancing ratio when we exaggerate characters, or even finding a ratio for the caricature. So every person, even in real life, has a different ratio in our head and face. Even body, we can still apply that. So these numbers could be changed, but always remember when you change one area, it should be affecting other number. Next, I want to talk about the spine. So one thing about the spine is, if you look at from the profile view, it's not a straight, it's not a straight structure that's holding a body. So spine, what the spine does is the spine is holding a pelvis here to the rib cage here, right? And the head. And if you look at here, it's making a curve. It's coming down from the anchor point of the skull here, which means skulls rotating around this anchor point. So always remember that the anchor point is kind of right behind the ear. You can see the spine is coming down with several curve. You always have to remember this. So this, as you can see, the bottom of the back is always pushed in. Meanwhile, your shoulder blade is always, pulled out. Because of spine is curved, your ribs is also, slightly this way. So always remember that, if you look from here, it's always leaned that way. So that's important to know. The profile view of the one head counted as a one head, and if you compare it to the rib, on the front view is a 1.2 head, on the side is a one head. If you go to the pelvis, the width is a 1.2, but the depth is only 0.7. The crucial thing that you need to remember is that this pelvis bowl is kind of leaned down that way, which means it's kind of leaned structure there. Meanwhile, kind of the rib cage is kind of facing up. If you look from the top view, the rib cage, let's say this is the head and this is the spine, right? The back view, meanwhile the front is kind of round, creating an oval shape. The back view is actually, there's a kind of pushed in area. Whenever you draw a back, always remember that spine is pushing the behind always remember that there's a if you look at it from the graph, there's always the muscle that's, I'm sorry, not the muscle, the spine creates that area kind of pushed in along the center line of the spine. So always remember that. It's very important to know. That's what spine does. And spine can bend over front or stretch back, kind of move aside. Other important thing is the shoulder blade and the collarbone. What they do is, they are the ones who move your arm. So if you look at this arm bone, the upper arm, you can see how it's connected to the shoulder blade, not the collarbone. So always remember that. Okay. So collarbone's anchor point is on the center, which means based on that, the shoulder blade and arm can move up and down. But this anchor point always stay on the chest bone. So this part doesn't move. It moves based on that. So let's say, it moves like, obviously, shoulder blade, when it comes down, shoulder blade kind of twists to the original position. So always remember that. So when we draw collarbone and the shoulder blade, what's important to know for you guys is many beginners kind of draw characters, very flat. They draw a torso very flat, but if you think about how collarbone and shoulder blade is surrounding around the ribs, it's actually creating a very oval shape. So it's you can see it's going around. Even the profile view, you kind of have to remember the shoulder blade and the collarbone is kind of in the 3D dimension. So it's going to help your drawings to be more 3D dimensional looking. So please don't just draw simple, unless you are drawing a cartoon kind of characters. If you want to draw realistic, don't just treat your torso very flat. Kind of treat them in kind of 3D dimensional way. When we study a bone, before we move on to muscles, there are a few important areas in our bones. If you memorize these, it's gonna be easy to memorize the muscles. So if you look at these dot color area, those are the areas where your bones don't meet any muscles, which means only skins are covering those areas. So it's, bring your finger or hand to this collarbone area. You can definitely touch the bone, right? And even the chest bone here in the center, we don't have any, muscles, around, over it. So definitely elbow area, we can definitely feel some bones structure there. Even the wrist, some of the wrist, we can feel it. Very important, pelvis line, the outer line of pelvis, we can feel where the bones are. I mean, obviously, there are fat pad and skin kind of covering, so probably chubbier character it's hard to see the pelvis line But you know, those who have a fitted characters who has a like a fitted, very fit body, you know, definitely pelvis line will be visible. Okay, so let's look at back. So definitely spine area we can feel the muscle, and look at the shoulder blade line here. This is the shoulder blade. There's a in the middle. There's a some kind of other structure that's going around, that comes out and goes around to meet the collarbone. That's where these thick lines here, that's where we can actually feel it. You can touch your back on the shoulder blade. You can feel the bone there, and definitely elbow area we can feel it. The back of pelvis, we can feel the bone. The reason it's important because that means usually the muscles start from they work like a boundary line for the muscles. So that's where usually that's usually where muscles start, and that's usually where the muscles end. So if you look at the back, you can see the muscles are starting from spine to the shoulder blade, and shoulder blade to the arm. So even the spine is kind of start line where the muscles start to wrap around your body. Below the pelvis line, there is another hip and muscles. So it's very important to know, kind of memorize them. It's going to help you to kind of figure out when you draw out of your imagination. It's going to be easy to figure out. Alright, so before we move on to muscle, this is about important key on the upper torso bones. So don't forget the collarbone and shoulder blade, and don't forget to include them on your drawings. And shoulder blade has the arm movement, and the ribs and pelvis, especially ribs, is kind of leaned because of the spines have a couple curved in area. And don't forget the anchor point of the skull, which is connected to the spine. Okay, so it's gonna help you to understand when you draw. It's gonna help you. So anchor point is right there. So based on there, the skull is moving like that. That's how you move. There are a few important keys that I kind of wrote it down. So first, line, shape, form, volume, they have to work out on your drawing. They still apply to human figure drawings. So it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, how much muscles, how much human anatomy knowledge you know. That's also important, but before that, the line quality of human drawings, the shape, form, and volume, they all matter when you draw a human figure. So I rather focus on these first before we add on, all those human anatomy, features. Okay. And number second is no bubble muscles. I'll show you the sample, what it means. When beginners draw a character, when the beginners think about the muscles, they always kind of picture it like a balloon, kind of roundish around the body. This is kind of the biggest mistake I see always from the beginners who absolutely has no idea what human anatomy is. If you look at this structure, this is how the beginners think of the muscles attached to the body structure. So don't think of it as a very round mass on it. Okay, think about it more like a flat surface attached to the other surface. So there's a slight bump and slight, volume mass is kind of attached to the flat structure. So if you draw in this mind, it's gonna help your drawing more better when you draw a human figure. Number 3 is always look at the big picture, which means if you are not used to the human anatomy, the first time it'll be easy for you to just focus on each part of muscles and how it moves and all that. And sometimes you might miss how it looks when you look at it the whole figure, because you focus on part of the body so much, and when you look at the big picture, the whole figure, every part kind of work different, and the whole body figure doesn't look great. It happens a lot for those students who study first time the muscles. So which means the whole body figure, before you move on to micro detail of the muscles, check your body gesture, line of action, weight, balance, the shape, form. I rather check all those basics first and then kind of worry about the muscle part later on. So keep this in your mind. It's gonna be helpful when you draw. So there are 2 parts in human neck I want you guys to remember. So definitely there are so many muscles in our body, so many bones in our body, but we kind of group them into bigger portions. We're not gonna do micro managing, micro studying every single details of the muscles. We're gonna kind of group them into bigger mess. So in the neck, there are 2 muscles that I want you to remember. This red sternocleidomastoid. So I'm gonna just call it sternal muscle. So definitely, man has a Adam's apple on the neck. There are 2 muscles kind of move your neck, around, kind of lift your neck up and down, and kind of surrounding your neck elements. The first is the sternal muscle, and the second is trapezoid. And if you look from the front view, you can divide the collarbone into 3 divide into 3 parts. If you divide collarbone into 3 parts, trapezius is coming from the neck and back from the back and kind of going around and kind of grabs that collarbone, that 1/3 part. Okay, so this is the profile view. You can see it's going around to the front to meet a collarbone. If you look from the behind, sternal muscle is very hard to see from the behind, but you can see the trapezius is actually very large muscle that covers, that kind of holds the neck. As you can see, a spine area in the center, is definitely covered by skin and not the muscle. So even this trapezius kind of skips that area and kind of begins new muscle here and there. So always remember that, and it's kind of covering the up, kind of partially top part of the shoulder blade. The reason you need to remember these 2 is these 2, as you exercise, these 2 can be grown, which means you can start exaggerate those muscles, like like this guy, or even non-developed as this girl here. You can play around those 2 muscles Okay, so when you move around your neck, let's say you lifted your neck up, which means the sternal muscle will be more stretched, right? And meanwhile trapezius will be squashed. And when you turn your head to the side, the anchor point is here and there, and probably here, right? There. So as you move, area will be kind of stretched, and this area will be kind of loosen the tension. So when you move your muscles, their location usually stay the same. It's just their volume mass changes from stretch to squash. So please remember that. One of common mistakes that I see on the beginner's work is they kind of distort the muscles when characters move, and usually it doesn't look great because it's not very realistic. It might be easy to think about when we move the muscles, probably move very extremely within our body, but that doesn't mean it's distorting the form. Usually form and shape and volume stay the same. It's just the matter of squash and stretch. So please keep that in your mind. Let's look at based on the bone here. So there, behind the neck to the front of the collarbone, there's this muscle, right? You can see the Adam's apple here. And behind the neck, to the end of collarbone here. It will be like that. Okay. So if you look from the side, trapezius is coming from behind the neck, kind of surrounding around over the next to the shoulder. So if you look from the behind, oops. It actually covers a lot of area in your back. Gonna start. So seventh spine is usually where easy to find, it's easy to locate because it's very visible from the outside. And that's kind of like the center of the human body in the neck area. So that's how trapezius start and end. You can definitely see some sternal muscle behind a trapezius muscle. So please remember that. Alright, so let's move on to the torso now. Torsos, as long as you remember where are all the muscles on front of the torso and the back of the torso, as long as you memorize them and they are not hard to draw because usually they don't really move that much big in your body. Usually legs and arms are harder to execute drawing because there's a kind of confusing stuff. So torso is actually very easy. Okay. Please take out your pen and paper. Kind of follow along as I draw over this bone structure. First you want to know is a chest muscle. So right above the end of the chest bone, about here, and according to this chest. So follow that along and follow after this under the collarbone, the first two parts, which is 2/3 under the collarbone. That's where the chest muscle kind of collide. So it connects to, it goes around. So always remember that the ribs is kind of roundish as well as the collarbone and shoulder blade. It goes around to the arm, right? And connects to the first area connects to this, and second area is kind of like that. So that's where our nipple, the male nipples are at. So consider this kind of first muscle in chest muscle and this area as a second. They're more connected in behind the first one. So that's the chest muscle. Okay. Let me kind of draw over again on the other view. First 2/3 under the collarbone. From the bottom of the collarbone, kind of connects to the arm. Meanwhile, the second par. Let's select that. Okay, so that's the color, chest bone, chest muscle. Second muscle I want to show you is the saw muscle. The saw muscle is where on the ribs side from second top to kind of seventh bone, the ribs. So it's only in the side of the ribs. And you probably wonder how many ribs we have. We usually have 24. Total ribs. But some people have less. And this saw muscle usually under the chest muscle. So it'll be, the position is gonna be like that. Okay, so I'll show you in the kind of quarter profile view. And if you look from the back, it's kind of hidden under the blade, shoulder blade. So that's the saw muscle. The second muscle I want to show you is the external oblique. External oblique is start from kind of back side, bottom, and kind of surrounds around. From pelvis to the ribs. Okay. So I want to draw that. So look at that pelvis line. So it follows along the pelvis line and kind of make a boundary for the abs. Kind of creating like another saw shape against the saw muscle. Please remember these areas. It's very important to remember to describe your side of ribs when you draw a character. Okay. So let's see this one. I think this guy, I made the chest too small. So if you look at it from the back, that's how it looks in the side. If you look at it from the back, there's a pelvis line. So above the pelvis line, kind of attached to kind of like that. That's the external oblique. And next is the abs on your belly, which we call like six pack, right? So there are two small muscle in the rib area, and now the six pack begins. Okay, that's how it looks. When you draw a six pack, be careful, don't make it two even squares kind of laid straight each other. Make sure you draw them from the top, it's very lean. Don't forget these curved line. This is a belly button. So always keep that in your mind. Okay, let me draw on the side view. So there are two small abs, and then there's a belly button. And for the last, broadest back muscle that kind of covers most of area in the back and kind of connects to under the arm here. So it's very visible if you lift your arm up. It's usually visible when you lift your arm up. So please, don't forget that. If you look from the back, broadest back muscle is covering, it's under the trapezius. So it's kind of wrapping around, it's under that thing. Below, kind of wraps around a little bit of shoulder blade, goes around. The ribs and kind of connects to the arm. Okay. And obviously these areas are kind of empty area in the muscle where thin skin layer is covering the spine. If you look at the back view, there are 3 more muscles on the shoulder blade. We're gonna kind of group them into one. So there's one muscle behind. Broadest back muscle is kind of going over. It wraps the shoulder blade, the bottom area, but it goes under that shoulder blade muscle to meet the arm. So please remember that. And there's a minor part here, which is next to the shoulder blade. These muscles are called rhomboid. So rhomboid is kind of hidden under the trapezius and broadest back muscle. So these muscles you must memorize in order to draw a human character. So when I say memorize, it means literally memorize. It'll be kind of tricky in the beginning. Otherwise, you will always need reference to draw your character. Once you memorize these, it's very easy to just draw out of your imagination. When we move torso around, think about where the stretch and squash happening. The torso's movement, no matter how they bend over to the side or front or back, no matter how it moves, your muscle, they are pretty easy to locate. They don't really change that much, other than just think about how if you bend over this way here, your left side will make a kind of stretch area and kind of squash the other. So the external oblique will kind of pop out more. So when you stretch back or front, you're bending front, see where are the area that kind of makes your muscle stretch and where the muscles where it bends. If you have more fat pad, you will have more stuff come out. But always remember the pelvis line is the boundary. So always make a line there. You'll probably have a belly down. Like that. But think about so because of pelvis line, the top parts will kind of overlap it, okay? When you draw a female and male, there's a little bit physical difference. The male has a shorter pelvis compared to the female. The male has a much more higher pelvis and kind of shorter in width. And meanwhile, female has kind of wider pelvis with the shorter in height. So that's the difference. When they play sports, usually the action and movement that male carries happening right here. The weight of the body usually carries on the shoulder and the chest, kind of on the up side for male. For female, when they run or when they do physical exercise, the weight carries on the hip area. So even they run, they have a kind of different style. because of physical difference. For female, female has the breast. So let's go over the breast a little bit more. So breast, if you look at the female's breast, they have a chest muscle, and then on top of it, they have this breast. So the nipple position is very similar to male. It's just they have the breast surrounding around the nipple area. When you draw the breast, don't forget that don't draw too circular on the surface. It should be more of this, kind of the drop of water is falling down, and the breast is it's an area where heavily affected by gravity. So always remember where is the gravity is at. The nipple direction and the breast direction, usually they're not straight looking front. They're actually slightly lean over to the side. So don't forget that. And because it's a area where it can be changed the form easily, very soft area. So let's say if the female character is laid on the ground, the bottom surface will turn flat, but always remember the volume stays same. Just like I told you how gravity works, let's say if your female character is laid on the ground, looking up the ceiling, the larger breast the character has, because of gravity is grabbing, breasts start to become more flat and then start to fall to the side. Okay? So it's not like when the character is laid down, it's not like this. Okay, it's kind of slightly, it's not like that. It's slightly flattened and kind of falling outside. Please don't forget these features when you draw a breast. Always remember where the nipples position, so probably same height, right? So be around there, and it's surrounding around and the chest muscle is same. The arm movement is kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky area where it bends and also it rotates. And as it rotates, the muscle shapes, the visible area changes. So please follow along. First, let's look at the bone structure. The reason it's tricky is because the upper arm rotates. Meanwhile, forearm has two bones that rotates. So if you look at this green elbow bone, when we say elbow, it's actually for the end of the forearm. You can see bring your finger to the elbow on the side. You can actually feel this upper arm bone too. And next to this green bone, there's another bone, kind of befriend with each other. So when they are kind of parallel each other, which means it means the palm, you can see the palm area. When the hands start to rotate, this is very, very important. Your forearm, these two bones start to collide and cross each other. So elbow bone, which is connected to the pinky area, is going behind. Meanwhile, these top part, let's just pretend the upper arm doesn't rotate, kind of stay still. Top area kind of stays same, but you can see how it start to cross each other. So when you fully rotate your hand 180 degree, which is, you can see the top surface of the hand, two bones kind of cross each other. The reason why the hand doesn't rotate 360 degrees is because these two bones, meet together and cannot go further than that. So definitely, if you move your arm more this way, which means this way, it's very hard, right? That means the green bone is going forward. Meanwhile, the other friend is going behind. Okay, so please don't forget this concept. It's very, very important, and it's gonna be really tricky when you start adding muscles on these two bones. I'm gonna start to draw muscles on the arm. Please follow along as I draw. So first, probably the shoulder muscle will be, what's important, right? So remember, the shoulder muscle is that wraps around from the front to the back, your shoulder. Remember the collarbone, we divided into, equal 3 parts. How first 2 parts were connected to the chest, right? The last third, 1/3 is connected to the shoulder muscle. Okay. And when, let's say this is a shoulder muscle, this is the chest muscle, and when where the chest muscle and the shoulder muscle meet with the collarbone, there's a kind of slight hole there, small hole there. So here, don't forget there's a hole. Some artists kind of describe it, some artists don't. So let me draw the shoulder muscle on the profile view. Is developed by 3 major muscle, but we're not going to go over them. The first muscle kind of moves the arm front, and kind of second muscle kind of moves the arm, lift your arm to the side. The last muscle kind of pulls your arm backward. Shoulder muscle is also covering part of the shoulder blade over those three shoulder blades muscles that we talked about in the torso. Tricky part of the shoulder muscle is actually the profile view has, if you look at it from the profile, is much more wider than the front and back. Okay, but definitely I'm very skinny person, so I don't really have this big shoulder muscle. So if you look at like, many skinny people who don't really have a fitted muscles, it's just like that. So it's hard to tell, kind of make a difference from front view and profile view, but still profile view should be much more wider than the front and back view. So especially when you draw a character like Street Fighters or game fighters who has a very developed arm muscles, make sure your profile shoulder is bigger than the back and front view. Okay, second is a bicep. So bicep is creating this kind of shape, very heavy mass, heavy volume on top. It gets very narrow and connect to the side of the forearm. If you look at it from the side view, bicep, tricep, shoulder muscle, I mean, if you go to gym, those are the muscles that very common to people who exercise. So it might not be hard for you to memorize them. So let's look at the tricep. I want to show you from the back view first. So tricep is connected to the elbow and kind of creating very similar shape like a bicep. The one tricky part is these area. They are not the muscle area. They're kind of very thin layer. It's like a white tissue area. So please remember this shape. If you look at it from the side, it's gonna look like this. Okay. So when you draw a character, the arm, the reason even skinny, always just make sure there's a two area that you might want to kind of describe in order to be more specific. Let me do a tricep here, and there are two kind of hidden muscles in between, like right below the bicep and in between like tricep. Brachialis. There's a small hidden And there's a one very hidden inside the bicep and tricep and shoulder. It's called coracobrachialis. It's connected to this dot here. So if you look at the shoulder blade, there's this area kind of popped out. Here, so it's connected to that. It's connecting that to the arm, like that. So you will never see it from front, back, or side. Okay, it's only visible when you lift your arm up. Let's look at bicep here, tricep, the shoulder muscle, shoulder blade muscle. This is broadest back muscle, a chest muscle. There's a tiny, I kind of exaggerate this big, but there's a tiny area where you can see this muscle. So when you draw a character lifting arms up, don't just wing it. Try to look at this human anatomy and see how you can simplify it. So it's important, beginners draw armpit, they just draw that. But there's no such this line in our body. So always remember that. Okay, let's go to forearms. Forearm has so many muscles. Definitely there are three major groups. We're gonna kind of group them into three. With that, you guys can kind of start your character drawing. Just like I say, how forearm rotates, and it's kind of tricky. The reason it's tricky is it would be nice if it's like the front is bicep and back is tricep, but it's not. There are three major muscles kind of wrapping around the forearm. So that's why it's confusing, because when you twist those three muscles, so some view you can see all those three muscles, some view you don't see only two muscles. So it's kind of tricky. The first muscle, the side muscle, come from the kind of next to the elbow here, and it goes down to the right under the thumb, like that. Okay, and I'll and always remember the hand position here right now. It starts from the side, and then it rotates around and ends on right below the thumb area. Okay, and let's look at. I'll do one by one on each view because it's kind of confusing. The other arm is. The muscle is the opposite side of this first muscle that connects to a right under the pinky area. Last third is what forms front. So it's kind of tricky, right? Let me show you once again in this view. So side muscle is connecting to the bottom. Okay, meanwhile the back muscle is right next to it. It's probably connecting to that in the behind the bones, right? And let me show you front. Front is kind of like that. Okay, let me show you once again. So let's look at first side view. Side muscle will come down. There's an elbow, right? So it's right next to the elbow, coming down, go behind, that bone, and the front muscle, covers like a up top surface. It's gonna look like this. And last, the other muscle is covering like that. Okay. Let me show you more in detail. So if you look at the green part, it's connected from the side to the bottom of the thumb, right? And it starts to rotate. You can see the hand rotates first and the forearm follows, right? Like that. If you look at the yellow, which is covering the backs on the bottom side of the arm, look how it's rotating around. So if you look at this red and blue, the top surface, see how it rotates. As it rotates, the other side of the yellow muscle kind of comes to visible area. You must memorize these in order to draw a character's forearm correct. Alright, if you look at the hand, you see the bone and front of hand, back of the hand. Let's look at the size of the hand. If you look at the size, when we usually talk about the size of the hand, we say it's close to the size of the face. If you look at this image, I took out the hand and then kind of copy paste over to this male's face. As you can see, when you open your hand, it's about the same size as your face. Okay, so we usually say 1:1 ratio, which means you can play this ratio once you start doing, character design or exaggerating your characters. All right. So don't forget that. So let's go back to this image. Within the hand, there are a couple features, which is definitely first palm area and the finger area. So we usually say the size of the fingers are kind of half of portion of the hand, and the palm kind of takes another half. If you look at the finger bones, the thumb has 2 bones, other rest of the fingers has 3 bones. If we put a number on the bones, let's say number 1, 2nd, and 3rd. Let's put 3rd one as 100%, which means 2nd bone on your finger, the size of it, the length of it is 75% of 3rd bone. And if you look at the first bone, the first one is also 75% of 2nd bone's length and size. Even if you look at the first bone on your finger, you can divide it into half. And first half is where the fingernail is at. So this is kind of general universal size ratio, which you can actually play around to see, what works best for you. I have my own stylized hand drawings, and everyone else has, their own unique hand style. Usually it's because of keeping the balance in the ratio. So in 90s, where DreamWorks was making El Dorado, and a lot of animated projects back then had very similar hand drawings, which is like they always made, try to mimic the style. They always make the palm very small, and they had a very long fingers. It was like a very trendy style back then, making a palm like a 30% of the size and making the finger into 70% of the size with a very thin. This was a very popular style back then. If you look at animated films and shows, each era, each decade had its own unique drawing the hand, how to draw a hand. So it's definitely good to look around, look at many animations and see how they treated hand. They made a style that works best for their animation style. So it's kind of intriguing to see. In 101 Dalmatian, Milt Kahl had very different style of drawing hand. Japanese animes has very different style of drawing hand. It'll be great to kind of explore those areas. So let's look at the hand. Couple features on the palm. On the front, top part of the hand, you can kind of see, if you look at your hand, it's easy to locate where are all the finger bones are. So you can it's easy to find where's all the bones structure is located at. And if you look at the palm, there are 3 pads that's kind of making surrounding around your palm area. It's very cushiony, soft mesh kind of pad that's making a structure on your hand. Which means if you look at it from the side view, you know how this area is flat, very flat. Meanwhile, the bottom is very round. If you look at it from the side view, this is how it looks like, right? So when you draw your hand, please don't forget this concept that top area touch the bones, and the bottom area is where the pads are. So when you draw a hand, please remember this concept, very important. Another feature on the hand is that if you look at from the wrist to how the palm is connected to the wrist, right under the pinky side here is where the line of forearm kind of makes a very fluidic connection to the pinky. Meanwhile, the thumb side has a very sharp turn on the line. So if you look at this other reverse view, you can see from the wrist there are 2 different lines connected to palm and hand. Pinky side has a very straight line down. Meanwhile, the thumb area has a very sharp turn. So when you actually draw on your character's hand, to follow the human anatomy design. So if you don't follow that one side, the straight one side is sharp turn, it becomes very cartoony drawings. But more you follow the human anatomy, it becomes more realistic, the view of character. And another feature is if you look at the hand, the distance between fingers, it's not like finger is there. It's not like straight making a V V shape like a glove. There's actually a good length of distance is created. So if you look at it from down here, you know, you can see there's a distance between the fingers. Please remember that. So when you draw a finger, it's good to have that, follow that key point. And another key point that you need to remember is when the fingers roll in to the palm to create a fist, the fingers can kind of make a movement around when it's stretched out, but when you make a fist with your finger, it's actually the direction the fingers, you know, come together. It's not like a straight coming down like a robot. You know, this is wrong. It's actually coming together with, you know, you see this line, it's coming together that way. So it's unique key point that you need to remember when you draw a hand. All right, so there are three kind of common mistakes that I see from students. Number one, beginners have a tendency to draw fingers very sausage-like look. For example, when they draw fingers, they make it very even sausage. Like that. Or, you know, they always kind of draw very round, you know, sausage looking. So if it's the style of the character, that's fine. But if you're drawing this way, regardless, it's not even the style. You're probably drawing this way because you haven't mastered the hand, you know, how to draw a hand in human anatomy. So if you look at our bone structure, you know how we have a joint that's making connections between the bones to bones. It's actually, you know, it creates kind of round shape, right? So when you put around the skin over the bones, that joint area becomes very fatty and becomes slim, and another fatty bump and becomes slim again. So it's kind of like this, creating this kind of curve. The amateurs usually only think about 3 fingers connecting. So there are time to time I see people draw the opposite way. They make the hand skin area very fat, but the joint very slim. That's wrong. So be careful that. And when you draw a finger, don't make it too round. Perfect circle. Okay. Kind of make it more flat. Kind of put your mindset that when you draw a finger, you know, it's not perfect rounds, but it's more flat with, you know, it's good to think about that way. So as you can see, I drew kind of simple sample here. You can see my fingers are not like a round, right? Round cylinder shape, but it's more kind of flat shape, right? So second is drawing the wrist, which means what makes your drawing more different than others usually is coming from very small details. A lot of beginners kind of skip the drawing the wrist area or even knees or ankles, but those small details kind of make your drawing better. So don't make it too like a forearm hand. Don't make it kind of very simple way. Try to add a wrist area, how it connects to the hand. My style is I usually draw wrist longer than the human anatomy in the ratio. Number 3 is anchor point. So this is kind of crucial thing. So when you bend your fingers, there's an anchor point, the joint that bends your fingers, right? So there's a joint, right? But because of our fingers are connected kind of above, many amateurs kind of make anchor point that way. When the anchor point is actually here, right? So beginners draw like when they make a fist, they put down fingers a little too high, but that's not correct anchor point. The correct area is when you bend your fingers to create a fist, they always stay near their anchor point. So this is the correct hand shape when you make a fist, not above. So if you look at it from the side view, let's look at the side view. Don't make it bend over here, okay? It should be this should be the anchor point where you can kind of rotate your fingers. So be careful of that. And another tip when you draw a hand, we usually draw a hand from forearm to wrist to the hand. It's good to see this way, okay? So let's say there's a line to the forearm, right? So follow that line straight to your top 3 in the middle finger. So that's gonna create kind of nice line work when you draw, and you can just add the thumb next to it and the pinky next to it. Okay, so when you draw a hand, keep that in your mind. You can add kind of fluidic line to forearm, wrist, to 3 fingers on top on the middle, and kind of add thumb and pinky finger to it. So that's kind of the key points I wanted to share with you guys. Okay, so let me do some demos how I draw a hand. So when you draw a hand, first figuring out the form and the location of each fingers, kind of outline details, that's all fine. Eventually you have to know how to do that. Many amateurs kind of lose how to draw a volume of the hand. So when I draw a hand, I usually think about the volume only before I think about the form and fingers. Let's say I'm making a fist, I'll probably draw now with the one stroke, with the one line, I made a fist. So I'll do some drawings of drawing the volume of the hand. So you don't really need many lines. You can just use few lines to create a volume, even very front view. You can kind of just draw the gesture of the volume. You can see very few, like couple or three strokes of lines, just kind of creating a volume. Volume can contain form, line, shape, and kind of fills in, what's the essence of the objects. When you draw a from forearm, it's always good to pose your fingers more relaxed. More relaxed, and don't ever draw like very straight down to the hand here. I mean, you can also draw, but I always try to make it more realistic. The wrist is actually pushing the hand to inside, so it's not actually a straight line down. It's very pushed in a little bit there, so be careful that. And when the hand is kind of straight, that's not a very natural pose. Even your hand requires strength to kind of make a very open stretch. That's not how the human hand usually look like in natural pose. So a human hand, kind of bend it a little bit. It feels like you're holding kind of egg softly. That's how the natural it looks when you draw a hand. Okay, so let's look at from the other view. Let's say so that's my line, right? So I can just add thumbs and pinky, kind of add the third and fourth fingers there. And the pointy finger are the ones who make the most dynamic movement, right? And usually unless you give a strength to other fingers, usually the other fingers kind of work like a follow through to pointy finger. Pointy finger kind of stretches back there, and other fingers kind of follow through that movement. So even if you look at it from so the thumb and the pointing fingers kind of stretch out. Other three fingers kind of follow through the first finger. The pointing finger. So usually that's how natural comes from. The thumb and pointing finger kind of creates some gesture or meaning, and meanwhile the other fingers kind of follow through the pointing finger. When you bend your fingers, always remember that we talked about the fingers come together this way, right? So the more pinky side, it will look like it's going that way. It's going this way. Okay, so be careful that. And when you make a fist, let's say a front view of the fist. You know, make sure these areas kind of coming together. And if you look at it from the other view, so I draw an anchor point, right? You know, giving a kind of rhythm to these fingers, you know, that way it's gonna make, you know, your drawing, hand drawing, a little bit more natural than just drawing very flat. Flat shape. Okay. So I'll draw a guy who, you know, looks like who wants to show off his upper body. So I always draw this line, and sometimes that, but I always think about how the bigger format how his, you know, body shape look alike, and kind of do the middle line there, right? So that's my body shape. So because of body shape compared to his body, his arm won't be that thick, right? So when you do animation, animate the character, you gotta put lesser line to describe many more. Okay, and usually lesser line is better. So I could put many informations, but it's gonna look like a guy from like a medical book, right? It doesn't look pretty. So if you wanna draw a guy who doesn't have like so much muscles, you just put simple lines. That's all you need. And you can see my neck muscle there with my collarbone there. Probably his muscle will look like this. Right? But I mean that's kind of too much, so I'll probably put just one line there, kind of show where that shoulder arm muscle gonna lay down. And probably tricep is going behind the shoulder muscle with chest muscle there, bicep there, so chest muscle, bicep, tricep, and that side, that will be there. But more, you can see more you draw, it becomes, Attack on Titan, the monster. So probably not too much. So bone will be kind of laid out there. Look at my lines, how it's simple line, but it's showing how how it contains the form of bicep to the elbow. mean, when I draw, I kind of memorize and I have my own formula. So I always draw, faster. But this time I want to be more accurate to what we studied today. So I'm kind of drawing slow and make sure you guys are following along. I put my pelvis line there. So even you're drawing a very simple character like this, you still have to kind of know the knowledge behind the human anatomy. Okay. Let's say you're drawing some kind of more the character who has more smooth kind of has a softer volume on the muscle, like a young boy or young girl. You will probably make a more softer line quality. Than like figuring out kind of, you probably won't exaggerate the muscles much, right? it's kind of rough. You probably have more simplified line than trying to show the muscle lines. Let me do some more complex characters. No, I gotta choose. Let's say if he's doing some kind of stance. Let me quickly rough that out first before I because he's on the profile, you know, he probably have double bone with kind of very deeply pushed in throat. And his neck shoulder will probably have a developed. Right? He'll have very large let's give him very large shoulder muscle. Which means he will have let's give him a club. So when we usually describe abs on belly, stomach, it's not great to show the whole thing. It's just kind of make a lighter version of that. Next, the bicep, triceps behind. So when you think about drawing kind of muscular character, just follow along your knowledge of your anatomy study, but don't always draw every single muscle into separate shape. You know, lesser line is actually better to describe so this is the under side of the arm, which means there'll be so you get the idea. Let me quickly do backside for the last. Maybe the upshot. So there's a neck, right? And there will be a so there'll be a shoulder muscle there, and neck muscle will be kind of hidden there. And the tricep. The shoulder blade. There's a breast line. And there will be a spine, right? Pelvis line there. Maybe she's a ghost in the shell. So definitely I'm not drawing this kind of drawing level. I'm just showing to show you, just think about how each lines represent what type of muscles we studied today. So there's a 2 shoulder blade. So there's an elbow, so which means this side will be down side of the arm. And I'm gonna have you can see, back view, I didn't really add any muscles other than showing with the shoulder blade and kind of outline of the rib cage there and how line falls back, and you can see the external obelisk here, and probably this line will be open broad back muscle connecting to that tricep here, and bicep. You can see the bicep a little bit in front, but I don't want to draw that much. So a little bit of shoulder muscle. The arm. The hip. And there's a pelvis. So there. Just when you draw, think about, it's very rough drawing. Think about how you can apply the anatomy we studied together.